And it is now being announced that Stefon Diggs not only lost the Super Bowl, he also lost his girl in the same night.
Nobody expected Super Bowl night to end like this. For months, Cardi B looked happier than she had in years. After the very public collapse of her marriage to Offset, fans believed she had finally found a fresh start with NFL star Stefon Diggs. She showed up to games, defended him online, celebrated his victories, and stood beside him when controversy followed him everywhere. But then came the biggest night of his career. A packed stadium, millions watching around the world, a championship on the line. And before the night was over, rumors exploded that everything between them had fallen apart.
Everybody wanted to see her at the games. They wanted to know her opinions, They wanted to see her support for him.
What started as a heartbreaking loss on the field quickly turned into something much bigger off the field. Strange body language, unexpected social media moves, breakup speculation, and then shocking allegations that sent the internet into absolute chaos. As fans try to figure out what really happened, one person seemed to be enjoying every second of the drama. Offset, the same man Cardi spent years trying to move on from, suddenly found himself back in the conversation, posting messages that many believed were aimed directly at the situation. So did Stefon Diggs really throw away the relationship everyone thought was built to last? And why are so many people saying Offset got the last laugh? Let's talk about it. The crazy thing about public relationships is that people usually think the breakup starts the day the headlines appear. It doesn't. Most of the time, the ending begins long before anyone notices. And when people look back later, they suddenly realize all the warning signs were there the entire time. That's exactly why so many fans are now looking back at Cardi B and Stefon Diggs and asking the same question. Were they already finished before Super Bowl Sunday even arrived?
But it was not only the good luck, it was her facial expressions, it was her body language.
Because when you rewind everything and put the pieces together, the timeline starts looking very different. At first, the relationship seemed almost perfect. After years of public drama with Offset, Cardi appeared to be entering a completely new chapter of her life. She wasn't talking about heartbreak anymore. She wasn't responding to cheating rumors. She wasn't posting emotional messages online. Instead, she looked focused, happy, excited, and most importantly, hopeful. For a lot of fans, that was refreshing to see. People had watched her go through years of ups and downs in one of hip-hop's most talked about relationships. Every breakup became a headline. Every reconciliation became front-page news. Every rumor became a social media debate. So when Stefon Diggs entered the picture, many people believed this was finally different.
You would be there, front row and center, to hold him and console him whether he lost or he won. The fact that she left speaks volumes.
He wasn't a rapper. He wasn't part of the music industry drama. He was one of the biggest names in professional football, and suddenly Cardi looked like she had found someone outside the chaos. The internet immediately became obsessed. Every appearance they made together generated headlines. Every photograph went viral. Every game day appearance became content. Fans started comparing them to other celebrity power couples who dominated sports and entertainment headlines. The attention was massive, but attention can be dangerous. Because when millions of people are watching your relationship, every small change becomes noticeable. Every facial expression gets analyzed. Every interview gets dissected. Every social media post becomes evidence.
And it is now being announced that Stefon Diggs not only lost the Super Bowl, he also lost his girl in the same night.
And according to many fans, the first real sign that something wasn't right happened before the Super Bowl ever started. During Super Bowl week, excitement was supposed to be at an all-time high. This was the biggest game of Stefon Diggs' career. The entire football world was watching. Reporters were everywhere. Celebrities were everywhere. The energy was electric. Then came one interaction that immediately caught people's attention. A reporter approached Cardi and asked what should have been one of the easiest questions imaginable. What message did she have for Stefon before the biggest game of his life? Now, think about that for a second. This is the man she had publicly supported for months. the man she had defended, the man she had celebrated. Most people expected a long answer, something emotional, something supportive, something memorable. Instead, she reportedly gave a short response, a very short response, and then moved on. The moment lasted only seconds. But on social media, seconds are all people need. Almost immediately, clips started circulating. Fans began replaying the footage, analyzing body language, studying facial expressions, reading between the lines. Some people thought nothing of it. Others believed they were witnessing the first public clue that something had already gone wrong behind the scenes. And once that theory started spreading, every new detail became fuel for speculation. The closer the Super Bowl got, the more questions people began asking. Then game day finally arrived. The stage couldn't have been bigger. Millions of viewers around the world. A championship on the line. A chance to cement a legacy. Everything was set up for a fairy tale ending. But sports don't always deliver fairy tales. Sometimes they deliver disasters. From the opening moments, things weren't going according to plan. Momentum started shifting. Pressure started building. And as the game continued, it became obvious that this wasn't going to be the night many people had imagined. The dream scenario was slipping away. Fast. By the time the final result became reality, disappointment had taken over. Fans were frustrated. Players were emotional. The entire mood surrounding the team changed. Just hours earlier, everyone had been talking about celebrations. Now they were talking about what went wrong. But while sports analysts were focused on football, social media was focused on something completely different. Cardi B. People started noticing she wasn't behaving the way they expected. Questions began appearing everywhere. Where is she? Why was she quiet? Why did everything suddenly feel different? And then the online theories exploded. Some fans claimed there had been tension for weeks. Others believed private issues had finally reached a breaking point. Nobody knew exactly what was happening, but everyone seemed convinced something was happening. And that's when the situation became even more complicated. Because once rumors start moving online, they rarely stay small. One post becomes 10, 10 become 100, 100 become thousands. Before long, speculation starts moving faster than facts. Stories began spreading across social media platforms. Fans started connecting unrelated events. Old interviews resurfaced. Past comments resurfaced. Previous rumors resurfaced. Suddenly, every moment from the relationship was being re-examined under a microscope. And the deeper people looked, the more divided opinions became. Some people defended Diggs. Others defended Cardi. Some blamed the media. Others blamed social media culture itself. But regardless of which side people were on, almost everyone agreed on one thing. The timing looked terrible, because what should have been one of the happiest weekends of their lives was turning into one of the most controversial. Then another name entered the conversation. Offset. And once Offset became part of the story again, the internet completely lost its mind. Because this wasn't just Cardi's ex-husband. This was the man whose relationship with Cardi had generated years of headlines. Years of controversy. Years of public drama. Many people assumed he would stay silent. Many people thought he would avoid getting involved. But that's not what happened. Suddenly, social media users started paying attention to everything he posted. Every comment, every reaction, every cryptic message. People began wondering whether he was watching the situation unfold in real time. And if he was watching, what exactly was he thinking? Because from the outside looking in, the entire situation was starting to resemble something nobody expected. The woman who spent years escaping one complicated relationship now appeared to be facing another public storm. The man who promised a fresh start was suddenly surrounded by controversy. And the biggest game of the year had somehow transformed into one of the biggest celebrity stories of the year. But what happened next is the part that truly sent the internet into overdrive. Because as new rumors started spreading and social media detectives went searching for answers, allegations began appearing that threatened to change the entire narrative. And once those allegations surfaced, the conversation was never the same again. What people believed happened after the game would turn a disappointing Super Bowl night into a full-blown celebrity firestorm. And that's where the story takes an even more dramatic turn. As the final moments of the Super Bowl faded away, and fans slowly left the stadium. Most people thought the story was over. A tough loss, a disappointing night, and another championship opportunity gone. But for Cardi B and Stefon Diggs, the real story was only beginning. Because while sports networks were busy discussing game highlights and missed opportunities, social media had already shifted its attention somewhere else. The relationship. Within hours, timelines were flooded with theories. Questions were appearing everywhere. People weren't talking about football anymore. They were talking about Cardi. They were talking about Diggs. And most importantly, they were talking about what might have happened after the game ended. At first, it seemed like ordinary celebrity gossip, the kind of rumors that appear after almost every major public event. But this time felt different. The speculation wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating. Every hour brought a new post. Every post created new questions. And every question pushed the story even further into the spotlight. One thing that fueled the conversation was how quickly social media activity appeared to change. Fans noticed things. Accounts that used to interact no longer seemed connected. Supportive posts disappeared from conversations. The online energy suddenly felt colder, more distant. And when fans notice a change online, they immediately start looking for explanations. Some believed the stress of the season had taken its toll. Others thought there were private disagreements happening behind closed doors. But then a much more explosive theory started gaining traction. Allegations, rumors, claims that nobody could fully verify. Yet somehow everyone was talking about them. Suddenly social media was flooded with discussions about whether Diggs had been communicating with other women, whether there had been trust issues, whether warning signs had existed all along. The internet became a giant investigation board. People were connecting screenshots, sharing old clips, posting theories, analyzing every public appearance. And as always, the more attention a story receives, the more dramatic it becomes. What started as questions quickly turned into assumptions. Assumptions turned into narratives, and narratives turned into headlines. The truth was becoming harder to separate from speculation. But for many fans, perception had already become reality. That's what makes celebrity relationships so difficult. Sometimes the public decides what happened before anyone involved even says a word. And that's exactly what appeared to be happening here. The conversation reached another level when old concerns about Diggs' personal life started resurfacing. Stories people had ignored months earlier were suddenly being discussed again. People revisited previous controversies, previous rumors, previous criticism. Everything was dragged back into the spotlight. And the more people looked, the more divided opinions became. Some fans argued that everyone deserved privacy. Others believed public figures invite public scrutiny. Some defended Diggs. Others believed Cardi should have seen warning signs earlier. No matter where people stood, one fact remained true. The relationship was becoming the center of attention. Not the game, not the championship, not the football season. The relationship. And for Cardi, that had to be frustrating. Because throughout the relationship, many people believed she had invested heavily emotionally. She showed support publicly. She attended games. She celebrated victories. She spoke positively about the future. To many fans, she looked genuinely committed, which is why so many people reacted emotionally when breakup rumors started spreading. Supporters felt disappointed, not because they knew the truth, but because they wanted the relationship to succeed. People love comeback stories. They love redemption arcs. And many believed Cardi had finally found one. Now that belief was being challenged. Every hour seemed to bring another rumor, another theory, another debate. And then came the detail that really captured the internet's attention. The possibility that trust had been broken, whether true or false. That idea became the centerpiece of nearly every conversation. Because betrayal is something people instantly understand. You don't need to be a celebrity. You don't need to be famous. You don't need millions of followers. Everyone understands disappointment. Everyone understands heartbreak. Everyone understands what it feels like when expectations collapse. That's why the story spread so quickly. People weren't just watching celebrity drama. They were projecting their own experiences onto the situation. Suddenly, the story became personal. Fans began sharing their own relationship experiences, their own heartbreak stories, their own warnings about ignoring red flags. The comment sections became emotional battlefields. And right in the middle of all that chaos sat one man who couldn't stop being mentioned. Offset. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For years, Cardi and Offset's relationship had dominated headlines. Their ups, their downs, their reconciliations, their separations. The public had watched everything. So when Cardi appeared to move on, many people assumed that chapter was closed forever. But now his name was back. Everywhere. The internet began comparing the two men, comparing relationships, comparing mistakes, comparing outcomes. People started asking a question nobody expected to ask. Had Cardi really upgraded? Or had she simply traded one complicated situation for another? The debate became endless. One side argued that comparing different relationships was unfair. The other side insisted the similarities were impossible to ignore. The louder the conversation became, the more attention it attracted. Reaction channels jumped in. Blog pages jumped in. Entertainment websites jumped in. Sports commentators even started discussing it. A relationship story had become a cultural story. And then something happened that pushed everything even further. Offset himself appeared to acknowledge the situation. Not directly, not with a long statement, not with an interview, but in a way that instantly got everyone's attention. Suddenly, people began sharing screenshots, discussing posts, debating meanings, trying to decode messages. And once that happened, the internet exploded. Because if Offset was reacting, then fans believed the story had entered an entirely new chapter. No longer was this simply about Cardi and Diggs. Now it felt like a three-person storyline. The ex, the current boyfriend, and the woman caught between public narratives. The reactions were immediate. Some people accused Offset of being petty. Others found the situation hilarious. Some argued he had no right to comment. Others believed he had earned the right after everything that happened in their marriage. The opinions were endless. But one thing was certain. People could not stop talking. Every refresh brought new discussions. Every platform had new debates. And while millions watched from the outside, nobody really knew what was happening behind closed doors. Only the people involved knew the truth. Everyone else was guessing. But the guessing wasn't stopping. In fact, it was getting louder. Because while fans were focused on social media reactions and relationship rumors, another side of the story was beginning to emerge. A side involving old patterns, old warnings, and questions about whether this outcome was actually surprising at all. The deeper people dug into the situation, the more they began revisiting the past. And once the past entered the conversation, the story took a much darker turn. Because suddenly people weren't asking what happened. They were asking whether this ending had been predictable from the very beginning. The more people talked about the breakup rumors, the more one uncomfortable question kept coming back. Was any of this really surprising? Because when emotions settle down and people stop focusing on headlines, they usually start looking at patterns. And that's exactly what happened here. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about a Super Bowl loss anymore. It wasn't just about social media rumors. It wasn't even just about a relationship. People began looking at the bigger picture. And once they did, they started asking whether the warning signs had been visible all along. For Cardi B, that question probably felt unfair. After all, nobody enters a relationship expecting it to fail. Nobody starts a new chapter believing it will end in disappointment. When people fall in love, they focus on possibilities, not problems. They focus on hope, not risk. And for a while, that hope seemed very real. Cardi looked happy, confident, excited about the future. Fans saw a woman who appeared ready to move forward after years of emotional turbulence. That's why so many supporters defended her throughout the entire situation. They argued that trusting someone isn't a mistake. Loving someone isn't a mistake. Believing people can change isn't a mistake. The real mistake, according to many fans, is taking advantage of that trust. And that argument gained momentum as more people reflected on the story. Because whether the rumors were true or not, one thing was undeniable. The relationship had become surrounded by controversy. The kind of controversy that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. As discussions intensified, commentators began revisiting everything that had happened during the relationship. Every public appearance, every interview, every viral moment, every headline. Suddenly people started noticing details they had overlooked before. Moments that seemed insignificant at the time now appeared different through the lens of hindsight. And that's the dangerous thing about public breakups. Once a relationship ends, everyone becomes an expert. Everyone believes they knew what was wrong from the beginning. Everyone claims the signs were obvious. But real life isn't that simple. When you're living inside a relationship, things aren't always clear. Feelings complicate logic. Hope complicates judgment. Love complicates everything. Yet despite that reality, the public conversation continued growing louder. And as it grew louder, another topic began dominating discussions. Red flags. People couldn't stop talking about them. Some argued there had been plenty. Others insisted the criticism was unfair. The debate became endless. But regardless of which side people supported, one thing remained true. The public image of the relationship had changed dramatically. What once looked like a fresh start now looked uncertain. What once looked promising now looked complicated. And what once looked stable now looked fragile. For many fans, that shift happened almost overnight. One week people were discussing a celebrity power couple. The next week they were discussing rumors, controversy, and heartbreak. It's amazing how quickly public perception can change, especially in the social media era. One viral post can alter an entire narrative. One rumor can dominate headlines. One bad week can overshadow months of positive moments. And that's exactly what appeared to happen. The breakup conversation became bigger than the relationship itself. It transformed into a discussion about choices, trust, accountability, and self-worth. Thousands of people shared opinions. Millions watched the story unfold. Some blamed Diggs. Some blamed Cardi. Some blamed nobody at all. They simply viewed the situation as another example of how difficult relationships can be under constant public scrutiny. Because let's be honest, being famous doesn't make relationships easier. If anything, it makes them harder. Every disagreement becomes content. Every mistake becomes a headline. Every emotional moment becomes public property. Most people experience heartbreak privately. Celebrities experience heartbreak in front of the entire world. And that's a completely different challenge. While social media continued debating what happened, Cardi seemed focused on something else. Moving forward, because regardless of rumors, criticism, or public opinion, life keeps moving. Careers continue. Responsibilities remain. Goals don't disappear. And many supporters pointed out something important. Before any relationship, before any headline, before any controversy, Cardi B was already a star. She built a career through determination, personality, and talent. She earned success long before this relationship existed, which meant she wasn't defined by how the relationship ended. That perspective resonated with a lot of people, especially fans who had followed her journey for years. They remembered previous setbacks, previous controversies, previous moments when critics claimed she was finished. And yet every time, she found a way to bounce back. Their resilience became one of the biggest themes surrounding the story. Because while everyone else focused on the breakup, supporters focused on what came next. The future, the comeback, the next chapter. And that shift in focus changed the conversation. Instead of asking who won and who lost, people began asking a different question. What's next? What's next for Cardi? What's next for Diggs? What's next for Offset? Because despite all the online debates, each person involved still had their own future ahead of them. For Diggs, questions surrounded both football and public perception. For Offset, questions remained about his reactions and his role in the ongoing conversation. And for Cardi, questions centered on recovery and growth. Yet out of all three, many fans believe Cardi had the clearest path forward. Why? Because she had already proven something throughout her career. She knows how to survive storms. She knows how to reinvent herself. And she knows how to turn setbacks into motivation. That's why so many supporters remained optimistic despite all the negativity. They believed this situation would eventually become another chapter in a much larger story. Not the ending, just another chapter. And maybe that's the biggest lesson hidden inside all this drama. Relationships end. Rumors spread. Public opinion changes. Headlines come and go. But personal growth lasts much longer. The internet loves discussing who got the last laugh. Who won? Who lost? Who was right? Who was wrong? But real life is rarely that simple. Sometimes there are no winners. Only lessons. Lessons about trust. Lessons about boundaries. Lessons about recognizing your value. And lessons about knowing when it's time to move forward. As the dust slowly settles around the situation, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The Super Bowl may have been the event that sparked the conversation, but the story was always bigger than football. It was about relationships, expectations, heartbreak, and resilience. The same themes that connect celebrities and everyday people alike. Because no matter how famous someone becomes, they still experience disappointment. They still make mistakes. They still hope for better days. And they still have to find a way forward when things fall apart. For now, only time will reveal the full truth behind everything that happened. Rumors will continue. Speculation will continue. Debates will continue. That's what the internet does. But eventually the headlines will fade. The conversations will move on. And new stories will replace old ones. When that happens, what people will remember most may not be the controversy itself. They may remember how each person responded when everything went wrong. Because character is often revealed during difficult moments, not easy ones. And as this chapter closes, millions of people are still watching to see what happens next. Not because of football, not because of gossip, but because everyone loves a comeback story. And whether you support Cardi B, Stefon Diggs, or neither of them, one thing is certain. The next chapter will be watched just as closely as the last. So what do you think really happened? Was this simply another celebrity relationship that couldn't survive the pressure of fame? Or were the warning signs there from the very beginning, hidden in plain sight for everyone to see? One thing is certain, what started as a dream season ended in a way nobody expected. A Super Bowl loss, breakup rumors, social media chaos, and an internet that still can't stop talking about it. But now the spotlight shifts to what happens next. Can Cardi B turn another difficult chapter into a comeback story like she's done so many times before? Will Stefon Diggs be able to move past the controversy and rebuild both his image and his future? And will Offset continue finding himself in the middle of the story he was supposedly left out of? The answers are still unfolding. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the biggest celebrity stories, entertainment drama, and viral headlines as they happen. And now I want to hear from you. Do you think Cardi B deserves better? Or do you believe the internet is jumping to conclusions before knowing the full story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.